Hey there, amazing friends. I warmly invite you to join me on this exciting journey by subscribing to my channel, liking, commenting, and sharing my videos. Every like, comment, and share brings us closer together and fuels my passion to create more great content. Your support truly makes all the difference. Thank you for being the heart of this community. Shadows Beneath the Oak Grove, The Peasant's Tale of Black Magic, and the Hag Who Bartered Souls. On the fringe of a forgotten kingdom, where rolling fields gave way to a bleak and forbidding stretch of forest, stood a small village named Auvigny. The inhabitants were mostly peasant folk, quietly tending their goats and meager crops in the shadow of a massive oak grove that loomed at the outskirts. Though unassuming at first glance, the villagers lived under a weight of old stories, tales as ancient as the towering oaks themselves. A traveler passing along the muddy roads might sense a hush in Auvigny's air, as if the land itself bore secrets. Few lingered unless they had pressing business. The place had a reputation for unnatural hush at dusk and for rumors of a hag practicing black magic. Indeed, for years, there were whispers about a figure in the oak grove, some malignant presence that bartered with desperate souls. Most of the outside world dismissed it as local superstition. Yet the peasants themselves knew better, having grown up with the legends told in hushed tones around hearth fires. The story of bargains struck in the gloom beneath ancient branches, and how not all those who ventured under those twisted limbs ever returned the same. A single dusty track cut through the village center, lined by modest huts. At the far end of the main street lay the rickety chapel, where Father Emile delivered trembling sermons about the need to remain vigilant against heathen traditions. Meanwhile, on the other side sat the old inn, its sagging roof a testament to the lean years. In the evenings, the inn buzzed with the low murmur of men exhausted from the fields, wives exchanging rumors about harvest prospects, and children dozing in corners. Only rarely did the talk turn to the oak grove, where the hag rumored to dwell within, for doing so risked drawing her attention, or so it was believed. The unwritten rule in Auvigny was, do not speak her name after nightfall. Folk might allude to the old woman in the forest, or the dark occupant, but seldom more than that. The sense of a watchful malevolence weighed on every word. And yet, life had to go on. People seldom ventured into the oak grove, but the farmland pressed near it. Now and then, someone might cut through the outer ring of trees to gather mushrooms or firewood, mindful never to stray too deep. The forest floor there was said to twist into abrupt hollows, and the canopy soared so thick that sunlight barely penetrated. The oak trunks jutted out at odd angles, knotted and bent. Especially under the moon's glow, they appeared almost animate, gnarled limbs coiling like serpents. The atmosphere bristled with an uncanny hush, as though the usual forest birds and squirrels avoided that patch. A goosebump or two came unbidden to any who approached. Among these villagers was a young man named Mathieu, a simple farmhand with a quiet nature. Orphaned at the cusp of manhood, he lived with an aging aunt who eked out a living weaving baskets. Though good-hearted, Mathieu felt an ever-growing hopelessness. The harvest had failed once again, debts mounted, and his aunt's lungs were failing her. Without money for medicines, his nights were spent lying awake, hearing her labored cough. Distraught, he found himself drawn to the darkest rumors in the village. Someone whispered that the hag in the oak grove could cure the incurable for a price. The mention of black magic sent chills through him, but as his aunt's condition worsened, desperation overshadowed caution. One drizzly afternoon, he found himself trudging through the muddy path leading toward the grove, heart pounding with each step. He told no one, not even his closest friend, for fear of condemnation, or perhaps that by uttering his plan, he would seal his fate. The oak grove's perimeter was well defined, the transition abrupt from farmland into a realm of dense, tangled branches. As Mathieu stood there, the drizzle pattered softly, and an oppressive silence descended. Even the wind felt muffled. Gathering his courage, he stepped under the canopy. Within moments, he understood the old stories. The grove's interior was almost gloom incarnate, roots snarling underfoot, and the air smelled of decay. Gnarled oaks rose all around like silent guardians or conspirators. Occasionally, a stunted ray of light penetrated, illuminating a swirl of mist. But the hush was unnerving. No birdsong, no insect chirping. The entire place felt outside the normal flow of the world, as though time itself slowed. He wandered deeper, half wishing he would see no sign of the hag, half praying he would find her before fear overcame him. The underbrush thickened, and the gloom turned almost opaque, so he resorted to stumbling with his hands extended. Then he spotted a faint glimmer of light, like a lantern flame, reflecting off wet bark. With trembling legs, he approached, heart thudding in his ears. As he neared, he saw a small clearing, occupied by a rickety hut made from twisted branches and thatched with moss. Candlelight spilled from within. The stories had claimed the hag's home lay near the center of the grove, a place rarely glimpsed. Steeling himself, he stepped forward. When he peered inside the doorway, the interior was cluttered with dusty vials, strings of bones, and ragged tomes bound in questionable hide. The occupant sat hunched over a bowl. If age had a face, it would be hers. Withered skin stretched over a gaunt frame, eyes sunken yet burning with an internal gleam. At his intrusion, she turned her head, revealing a grin of few teeth. "You come at last," she rasped, voice carrying an odd musical lilt as though echoing from a deep well. The startling phrase suggested she had expected him, or maybe she greeted every intruder thus. Mathieu suppressed a shudder, recalling the repeated warnings about black magic. But images of his aunt's pained cough spurred him on. Summoning his courage, he explained his plight. Had come seeking a cure for the woman who had raised him, a remedy that normal healers could not provide. The hag listened, face unreadable. With a bony hand, she beckoned him inside. Nauseating odors, rotting herbs, rancid fats coalesced, turning his stomach. She rummaged among the clutter, producing a small clay vial whose contents sloshed a thick, dark fluid. "Give your aunt 1 drop each dawn for 3 days, and her lungs will mend," she whispered. "But there is always a price." Mathieu offered what meager coins he had, but she laughed, a sound like brittle twigs snapping. "Coin I do not need. I require something deeper. A vow on your soul that in time you repay me. The form of that repayment, I decide." Fear lanced through him. He recalled the rumors. The hag traded in intangible debts, bartering future joys or precious memories. Or worse. Yet the image of his aunt lying pale and wheezing overcame all reticence. With a trembling nod, he agreed. The hag commanded him to kneel. She placed a small brand, a twisted symbol, onto the back of his hand. He gasped at the burn, though the hag's eyes glowed with triumph. "Now your vow is sealed," she hissed. She pressed the clay vial into his palm, then dismissed him with a wave of her spindly arm. No sooner had Mathieu left the grove, the gloom parted slightly. He realized it was almost dusk, though had have sworn had been there only an hour. The brand stung, but a sense of relief soared in him. He had the cure. He returned to the village under the cloak of darkness. The next morning, after mixing a single drop into a warm broth, he fed it to his aunt. Over the next 3 days, her cough lessened until she could breathe freely, tears of joy shining in her eyes. The entire household praised this miracle, attributing it perhaps to a new medicine from the city, as Mathieu told no one of his true source. The brand on his hand, though covered by a bandage, remained a constant reminder. He tried not to dwell on the hag's final words. For a few months, life felt hopeful. Then came subtle changes. At times, in the dead of night, he woke to a sensation of cold air brushing his face, as though someone silently hovered near. He'd see fleeting shapes in corners, a hunched figure that vanished when he blinked. On random mornings, he found muddy footprints near his door, shaped like a woman's but elongated, as if twisted with age. Panicked, he recalled the hag's vow. Was she checking on him, reminding him of the debt? Growing dread gnawed at him. He tried ignoring it, focusing on daily tasks. But an intangible weight settled on his chest, the knowledge that black magic always came with hidden cost. His predicament worsened a few weeks later when a spate of odd occurrences rattled the entire village. Chickens were found slaughtered, arranged in bizarre circles outside barns. A stable hand glimpsed a shape prowling at the outskirts, accompanied by a noxious odor. Doors rattled at midnight, as if tested by invisible hands. The talk in the tavern fixated on black magic rumors, and references to the oak grove cropped up again. The newlywed wondered if some force had targeted them because she survived an ailment that by natural means should have ended her. She confronted Mathieu, who squirmed under her penetrating gaze. Eventually, he confessed everything. Horrified, she recognized that the cure came from a source more dangerous than death itself. She demanded they find a way to break the pact. But no one in the village, not even Father Emile, had the knowledge or the courage to face the hag directly. It was during this tense climate that sightings of a withered woman, clad in filthy rags, spiking a staff into the ground near the edges of farmland, became frequent. Tracks of single footprints leading into the grove were discovered, sometimes accompanied by half-burned animal remains. The peasants muttered about a spreading curse. Crops near the grove withered unexpectedly. Water in certain wells turned brackish. In frantic attempts to appease any malevolent presence, some villagers left offerings at the forest line: milk, bread, even small animals. But the spree of unnatural events continued. Father Emile organized nighttime vigils, chanting prayers at the chapel. The gloom thickened, overshadowing the once quiet village in an aura of fear. From time to time, children claimed to see a stooped figure with a mouthful of black teeth beckoning them from across the field. Their parents, terrified, kept them indoors past sundown. Increasingly, suspicion fell on Mathieu. People remembered how his aunt had miraculously recovered. Possibly he had a connection to the old crone, forging a pact that unleashed something vile. Murmurs of confrontation arose in the tavern, though no one wanted to provoke the hag if she was behind this. One moonlit night, a few braver souls accompanied Father Emile to bless the perimeter of the farmland with holy water. They heard strange howls in the wind and glimpsed flickers of greenish light among the distant oak trunks. Feeling outmatched, they retreated, jaws set in grim acceptance that they were dealing with something beyond standard exorcisms. Racked by guilt, Mathieu realized he had to take action. If the hag demanded a debt, perhaps he could face her, negotiate a different arrangement, or forcibly break the vow. Summoning all courage, he confided in a traveling wise woman named Odette, rumored to practice old herbalism, but also versed in certain protective wards. She listened patiently to his story. In hushed tones, she explained that once a vow was sealed by a brand, the only ways to undo it involved either fulfilling the hag's request or enacting a ritual to forcibly sever the bond, though that latter risked dire retribution. Odette offered him a small charm carved from rowan wood, said to repel the lesser workings of black magic. It may not defeat her power, she cautioned, but it can help keep your senses clear. If you choose to confront her, do so in the final hour before dawn, when her power is at its ebb. And you must not show fear. Her instructions sounded precarious, but no alternative existed. The bizarre happenings in Auvigny grew each day. More animals mutilated, more fields rotting, more eerie shapes prowling the outskirts. The villagers whispered that the entire region might be cursed if the situation continued. On a night thick with gathering storm clouds, Mathieu ventured again into the oak grove. He carried a small lantern, a dagger, and the rowan charm. Stepping carefully among the twisted roots, he felt a chill that seemed to seep into his bones. The canopy overhead rustled, though no wind moved outside. He followed what he hoped was the route from his prior visit, half expecting the grove to shift. Time felt distorted as before. Eventually, he glimpsed the faint flicker of candlelight from the hag's hut. Drawing a shaking breath, he approached. The door was open, revealing the hag inside, muttering over a black brazier that emitted thick, acrid smoke. At his arrival, her voice ceased. She turned, eyes shining with an otherworldly glow. "Come to fulfill your debt, little mortal?" she hissed. The reek of burnt herbs choked him. Summoning his nerve, he demanded to know the cost. Her grin widened, revealing rotted teeth. "I have waited for your soul, but the time is nigh. I see your realm trembles. My power seeps in, thanks to the door you opened with your vow." She advanced a step. "Now you can volunteer another soul in your place, or relinquish your own. If you refuse, my creeping darkness will smother the fields, devour your kin. The choice is yours." The words hammered him with dread. He realized the cost was a human soul. She demanded a sacrifice. Perhaps that explained the strangeness around the village. She was building her dominion, feeding off fear. But Mathieu refused to yield. Summoning a quiver of resolve, he brandished the rowan charm, reciting from memory a short protective incantation Odette had taught him. The hag recoiled fractionally, her face twisting in contempt. Her robes fluttered as if a swirl of wind circled her. He pressed on, voice trembling but unwavering. "I break this vow. I revoke your claim on me and on my kin. This place shall not be your feeding ground." Her laughter curdled the air, intensifying the stink of sulfur. She conjured a small orb of sickly green flame in her hand, hurling it at him. The rowan charm glowed faintly, and the flame dissipated. Yet the hag advanced again, sneering that a simple amulet could not sever a brand forged by her ancient arts. What followed felt a surreal dance of defiance. He circled around her brazier, the acrid smoke stinging his eyes, while she taunted him with rasping words, describing how easily she could claim not only his soul, but those of everyone dear to him. He retorted that the land rejected her corruption. Summoning his courage, he lunged to upend the brazier, scattering the burning contents. A wave of scorching heat singed him, but the hag let out a shriek, her power momentarily disrupted by the destruction of her focus object. Seizing the moment, he reached within his coat for the small container of blessed salt Odette had also given him. With a fluid movement, he scattered it around the hut's center, forming a partial ring. The hag's screech gained intensity, as if the salt ring burned her shadows. She lashed out, but the amulet glowed again, deflecting her strike. For an instant, the swirl of darkness that cloaked her parted, revealing a haggard face contorted in ages of malice. For what felt like eons, they stood locked, energy swirling, the donkey's bray of thunder outside the hut. At last, the hag's aura flickered. With a final shriek that rattled the hovel's walls, she hissed, "So you choose the path of struggle? Then let the vow be undone." but you will regret your insolence." A sudden gale extinguished the candles and the fire, plunging the room into near darkness, save for faint moonlight from a crack in the roof. By the time Mathieu's vision adjusted, the hag was gone, leaving only the stench of burnt incense. He stumbled out of the hut into the swirling gloom, the brand on his hand searing with pain. Minutes or hours might have passed as he navigated the twisted trunks, eventually staggering out onto farmland, heart pounding in relief that he had survived. The brand's sharpness eased, though it still bore a faint outline. But in that moment, he sensed the vow had broken. The reek of malevolence that had weighed on him for weeks felt diminished, though not entirely vanished. At dawn, he returned to Auvigny, exhausted and half delirious. People realized something crucial had changed. The air no longer felt charged with dread. The animals seemed calmer. The rotting crops stabilized. Over the next few days, the bizarre nighttime intrusions ceased. Chickens no longer turned up slaughtered, and the swirling shapes in the fields vanished. Though the village quietly rejoiced, suspicion lingered. They demanded to know what Mathieu had done. He admitted only that he had confronted the source in the oak grove, that the cost had nearly paid was undone by a ritual. Father Emile offered prayers of thanks for deliverance from dark influences. The talk of black magic receded into folk memory. Yet the brand on the back of Mathieu's hand remained as a faint scar, a permanent reminder that tangling with the shadows has consequences. He and his aunt lived more peacefully, though he always kept the Rowan charm near, half expecting the hag to return for vengeance. And as for the hag, sightings all but ended. Once in a while, a shepherd claimed to see a woman's silhouette at the edge of the oak grove at dusk, eyes glowing with bitterness. Perhaps she was too weakened to reassert dominion. Possibly she lurked still, awaiting a new opportunity or a less prepared victim. The peasants avoided the grove, returning to superstitious offerings at its fringe, just in case. Over time, the story of how a single farmhand faced down the hag who bartered souls became a local legend. Rumors morphed the details. Some said he stabbed her with a holy blade, others that he outwitted her in a riddle game. But in truth, the final result was the same. Auvigny resumed its modest life, free from immediate overshadowing gloom, yet forever changed by a realization that magic, black or otherwise, lurked beyond the threshold of everyday life. The notion that an innocent obsession, like the desire to save a loved one, could open the door to such dark bargaining stands as a cautionary parable among them. In the years following, travelers passing through Auvigny might find the region quiet, though occasionally the hush at twilight raised gooseflesh. They might inquire about the old oak grove, prompting the villagers to share half-lowered whispers. "We do not disturb that place. Once a hag lived there, bartering for souls. A young man ended her dominion, or at least weakened it. We keep to ourselves. The forest remains. She may still be out there, cursed or undone. We do not ask." Some travelers, disbelieving, tried to venture in, typically returning shaken, swearing they heard whispers among the ancient roots. Others insisted the place felt ordinary, no sign of ill presence. But the older folks in Auvigny knew better. They recognized that darkness has ways of lingering, even after a victory. On the edges of society, older evils sometimes fade, but rarely vanish entirely. Still, an abiding hope emerged from the saga, the knowledge that mortal courage and a measure of cunning could stand against even the darkest powers. The peasants retold the story as an affirmation that though black magic can creep into unguarded hearts, unity and moral resolve can drive it back. They hailed Mathieu as a modest hero, though he shrugged off the accolades, remarking only that if not for an old wise woman's counsel and the love for his aunt, he might have succumbed to the hag's demands. That blend of humility and unwavering devotion forms the core moral in the retellings. Under the gloomiest oak canopy, a single act of selflessness can banish the shadow. To outside ears, the story might sound a mere folk tale, but to those in Auvigny, it stands as living memory. Children learn to be wary of two desperate bargains, of the hush under ancient branches, of strangers offering cures that come with hidden strings. And if ever a rumor arises of a renewed presence in that grove, a new swirl of dead animals, an uneasy quiet, they recall the farmhand who once risked everything to break a vow sealed in black magic. And while the hag's final fate remains a mystery, the village continues on, each sunrise a testament to resilience. For no matter how terrifying the shadows beneath the oak grove might be, human resolve can still cast them aside, at least long enough for honest life to thrive. Thus, the peasants endure, guardians of a cautionary tale about how the line between desperation and darkness can be perilously thin, and how, in the hush of a cursed forest, a single soul might tip the balance for better or for worse.